Spacefarer. What the UFO? I'm speaking with Jeff Kripal today. Dr. Jeff Kripal, excuse me. He's a historian of religion, he's an author, and he is the founder of the Archives of the Impossible at Rice University. Jeff, it's great to meet you. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Caleb. I'm happy to be here, really.
I'm really excited to talk to you, man. I think you're doing something extremely special with Archives of the Impossible in particular. I think you're becoming a locus of research and attention in the UFO and sort of spirit space in a really fascinating and important way. So congratulations on that work. Would you like to maybe start there and tell us what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I personally think it's the most exciting thing in the world. I mean, that's why, of course, why I do it. The Archives of the Impossible is it's kind of a broad umbrella. There's a physical archive collection that exists at Rice University, and there are about 18 collections in a place called Woodson Research Center. And the Archives of the Impossible is essentially the intellectual project around it. It's a series of conferences I've co-hosted or hosted now for really 4 years, or 5 years now, 3 years. I guess 4 years. I'm sorry.
Time? We're not sure.
A long time. It started in the end of COVID, and we just did our last and third one.
Okay.
It really looks at everything anomalous or impossible. It does not take a position. I mean, the goal of the project is to open a space up, authorize other voices, and but keep things very academic in the sense of really including all these voices and keeping things on the table, as I say. That's really the goal. And of course, I have my own inclinations or my own intuitions or convictions about it, but that's not what the project is about.
So did it begin with Whitley Strieber's documents, your collection, your literal physical archive? Did that start with the Strieber letters?
It actually began with Jacques Vallée.
Oh, okay.
Jacques approached me in, it was Berkeley, California, and he was taking me to the airport, and he asked me for help with his files and correspondence. And I naively thought, oh, I'll think about a university that can take these. And I got back to Rice, and I was like, well, why can't we do that? You know, I mean, Rice has a historic relationship to NASA, by the way. And it just seemed right to me. And so that was in 2014. And it took us 4 years to negotiate this first gift with Jacques. So 2018 was the year of the gift or the donation of the papers. And then I contacted Whitley and Ed May and John Mack then through Karen Austin came on board. So there was a kind of, I call it a black hole. There was a kind of gravitas that was created that just people kept coming in and wanting to really preserve their life work. It's really what I think it's really about at the end of the day. It's about legacy is really what it's about.
Yeah, and knowing that the work that they've done can be useful to future scholars and future minds who want to engage with it in a structured and safe space.
Yeah, one of the things I've realized is that the archives and Woodson Research Center at Rice, it's a sort of gold mine. It's a treasure in the rough. People don't know about it, but it's really astonishing. I am amazed every time I engage the archivist or the archive itself. I say there are 18 collections. Some of them are very large. Some of them are 50, 100 boxes, big, and they're professionally stored and preserved. And it's impressive. It's really impressive.
It must have been a complicated feat to just get the funding for this. Did you get it from Rice, or did you have to seek private support to set this up?
Well, there are a couple answers to that question. First of all, Rice University provides the archival space and the archivists, and I would guess most of the funding, but we do require archival funding form what we call the Center of the Impossible, which is really what we're doing now. And that's really to lock this in for the future and to create a kind of intellectual and institutional space around these archives that can carry on after I retire or
Yeah.
die in a fiery car crash, as I joke. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all mortal, Caleb, and an institution or a project like this should not be around a single individual. It should be a communal or social or intergenerational project.
That's really wise of you. One other brass tack question I have is how much digitization are you doing as part of this?
So I get that question all the time.
Okay.
The answer, again, is complicated. We are digitizing and scanning documents for what we call our metadata research project that Karin Austin is leading.
Cool.
We do rigorously follow what's called IRB, Institutional Review Board guidelines that every university follows. Requires us not to reveal identity markers.
Okay.
And anything personal. It requires a number of processes, but that's really why this isn't just thrown up online and made available to the public. It's because of ethical and moral issues that particularly exist at a university and that we follow judiciously and very closely as we can. So there isn't, to answer your question, there isn't anything that's available online as of today, but a number of these collections are immediately available to anybody who shows up physically and who wants to do actual research with them. They need to come to Woodson Research Center and do the actual physical labor there.
Well, that's a great transition to ask what kind of scholarship you imagine this archive being especially well poised to support.
Yeah. I would say, first of all, this archive, so there are 18 collections. There are probably a little over 1,000 collections in total in the Woodson Research Center. We get about half of the research interest, to kind of give you a
Wow.
feel. Yeah.
It's really high.
It's really, really high. I would say that most researchers who come from around the country, even from around the world. A lot of artists, by the way, who are interested in the art and the images in the archive, but also historians and philosophers who really just want to look at a particular collection with a lot of time and a lot of care. So I would say most of the attention or research attention so far is art historical or historical in nature.
Fascinating. I've been also really intrigued by the data analysis potential. I spoke to a young man named Michael Kelly who's been working with you a little bit and pulling some data and just like aggregating simple stuff like what kind of beings are people reporting in their supernatural encounters, and what are the characteristics of time and activity that align with some of these reports. And that strikes me as another very fruitful potential area of investigation.
Well, Michael's involved very much in our metadata research center.
Cool.
And I would say that the focus of the Archives of the Impossible is on the experiencer. It's on these experiential accounts. There are other collections and other research projects that are more oriented towards what we call the nuts and bolts, or the scientific aspect of it, material aspect of it. We are much more involved in and capable of analyzing the qualitative or experiential dimensions, of which we have many, which we have thousands actually. And so that's really the metadata research project, is how do we use something like AI? How do we use scanning to study these experiential accounts, and like what entity is encountered and where this happens and to whom? Those are just markers, that we certainly are interested in, but they really just scratch the surface, to be quite honest.
Yeah, this is great. This is very interesting, and I think this is a good transition toward maybe what might be the body of our conversation here about what you're hoping to see in academia in terms of like approach to and engagement with subjects like these. I want to flag here that I have read and really enjoyed your works, The Flip and Super Space Natural with Whitley Strieber. Those are the only two books that I've read, so please forgive me if I ask you questions that you've answered in other works. I would strongly.
That's the joke, Caleb. It's like, oh, it's in that book. It's in the book you didn't read.
Yeah, right. You can just dust anything under the carpet that
No.
that you don't want to answer by directing me to another work.
No.
But I also want to strongly recommend that people check out at very least The Flip. I think it's fascinating and exciting and really like kind of bracing. It's short, it's punchy, but at the same time it's deep and it feels serious, but it's engaging head on with a bunch of woo stuff.
Yeah.
And I think people in this space will really appreciate both its engagement with the supernatural and its kind of like call to action for academia.
Yeah.
And I also want to flag for people listening that after we do this, the one other big area that I'd love to explore with you is some metaphysical models, and that can be our sort of playground treat dessert after we do the academic exploration body of our conversation here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to give an image that I often talk about, I personally think the project is about putting things back on the table again.
Mm.
And so models that take things off the table, I don't like. I think they're too quick and dismissive, and they take things off the table. And I want the table to have all of these things on it. And by all of these things, I mean all of these impossible things that people report. I think these experiences are very common. I think they're virtually universal. I think they exist in the billions of human beings. And I think that the notion that they're rare or unusual is simply a function of our social censorship, which keeps these things down and calls them woo-woo or whatever, or hallucinations or mental pathology, or there's all these easy kind of dismissive moves that people make, none of which really are persuasive. If you talk to the experiencers. And what the Archives of the Impossible is very much about is bringing scientists, social scientists, and humanists together and saying, okay, let's talk about this in a safe space, but let's talk about it in the terms of your science or your social science or your humanistic training. And that generally makes intellectuals very comfortable, actually. My experience as an academic is that most intellectuals are in the closet on this one, but they don't come out because they don't want to sound like the tabloids. They don't want to be wearing the tinfoil hat, or they don't want to be heard as believing in little green men, so they shut up. But if you open up a conversation and you start talking about genetics or astronomy or physics or anthropology or history or literature or religion in a rigorous way, they're very comfortable, generally speaking, talking about these things. Because what they realize is actually these altered states and extraordinary experiences are essentially the keys to a lot of history and literature and science. And they understand that, and so they go there, but they do it rigorously and with their own particular training.
Yeah, sounds like you're advocating a multidisciplinary approach there.
Absolutely,
welcoming people in.
Yeah, because and people will say, "Well, what do you think?" or "What do you like? What do you think a UFO is?" And I always say, "I don't know." And by that I don't mean a rhetorical. It's not a rhetorical move. It's not a slight. It's not a dodge. It's very genuine. It's an intellectual position that not knowing an answer is itself an answer, if I can put it that way. And it allows for this multidisciplinary conversation then to take place that I think is extremely revealing. Because you do kind of get a sense of this object or set of objects by coming at it from different angles.
That's interesting. Something that popped up for me is the distinction, to the extent there might be one that's useful to draw, between agnosticism and curiosity.
Yeah.
I've bumped into this a little bit in this space, speaking with some scientists who are sort of happy to be open-minded, but not that curious to investigate. And I
Yeah.
wonder if that's a challenge you perceive.
So this is me, Caleb. I don't like agnosticism
Hmm.
as a position because I think it's a cop out.
Mm.
And I think it just resets the dials to some form of materialism or historicism.
Hmm.
So I like the metaphysical model thing that you alluded to earlier. I think people need to take a position, take one openly, tentatively, okay,
Yeah.
but agnosticism is essentially a refusal to take a position, but it's basically also a form of materialism that
Mm.
is itself a metaphysical model. So just say that. Just say, okay, that's my model, and this is what it gives us, and this is what it doesn't give us.
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, I get that, and I understand why you adopt that particular model. But here's where it doesn't work, and then I'll poke the bear and talk about
Hmm.
how that particular model doesn't work in X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, it can't explain these phenomena, which are broadly reported, or you can
It
hear in
takes
any conversation at a cocktail party.
it takes them off the table. It
Hmm.
says, so what I mean by the impossible, of course, I don't mean things that are literally impossible. I mean things that don't inhabit a space of possibility in our present worldview. So my response is, well, change your freaking worldview then.
Yeah.
Don't tell me these things don't happen, because they obviously do happen.
Yeah.
Um, if they're not possible in your worldview, there's something wrong with your worldview. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about where the friction is, and that's where I think we can actually make some progress and where we can kind of get somewhere.
Yeah. Answers. I wonder what you think about something I've been doing mentally recently, is just kind of shifting the burden of proof a little bit. I would say 5, 10 years ago, I was maybe not a strict materialist, but I leaned strongly toward materialism. I was generally an agnostic, but in that way that, as you mentioned, sort of defaults to our
Yeah,
intuitive
yeah,
enlightenment materialism.
yeah,
And now my position is that I'm sort of defaulting to the other side of the table. Like
yeah.
my default expectation is that there are layers to spiritual reality we don't understand, and we're going to learn more about them. And I'm sort of like open to being convinced otherwise, but until I see great evidence that those things don't exist, I'm going to go ahead and intuit that they probably do, because of the, as you mentioned, billions of reports of such phenomena. So I wondered how that bounced for you. Does that feel
Yeah,
right as a posture, or
yeah. I mean,
complicated?
yes. I mean, I think that's the right positioning, or right. I mean, the call for proof
Hmm.
is itself a materialistic paradigm already.
Hmm.
It's itself. What it means is that there's only one way to really be sure of reality, and that's science.
Hmm.
And so, prove it means make it fit your scientific method.
Hmm.
And my response to that is not to prove things; it's to call into question that model.
Hmm.
So I'm much more interested in the frameworks and calling them into question than I am about proving or disproving the phenomena, which I think is always tricky. It's really
Hmm.
impossible to prove it, but that itself is interesting to me. It's part of the phenomenon.
This is cool. This is fascinating, because this is, I think, maybe one of the only areas where we're going to have like slight divergent intuition. So maybe I can push you here a little bit and
Yeah,
brush me back if you'd like. My I think a holdover of my like empirical agnostic materialism is that I really want some scientifically rigorous evidence about these kind of high woo supernatural claims, and I'm very excited about moving
yeah,
us in that direction. And I heard you say in one of your books, I think it's Super Space Natural, that you are sort of skeptical that the hard sciences are going to be able to, at least in their current incarnations, get us the kinds of answers that we want. And you're more interested in advocating for the humanities to take us a more sort of open-minded approach to evaluating these subjects with the expectation that some of them might actually represent reality and not just kind of like narrative constructs that we've used to help explain the world. So that didn't really come down as a sharp question, but how do you
No.
feel about the project of pursuing and evaluating truth claims scientifically in this space?
So I think it's really important. And again, it's one way into the material, and I would never question my scientific colleagues who want to use physics and astronomy and genetics, as a way in. I'm like, go for it, do
Mm.
that. But I don't think that they will ever get us there.
Mm.
I mean, I think we can establish the easy stuff. We can establish that UFOs really happen and that poltergeist stuff really happens. I mean, these things happen, but to require this to appear in a laboratory or in a scientific method is essentially to make it disappear.
Mm.
And then they'll say, oh, well, it doesn't do that, therefore it doesn't exist. I'm like, well, that's just your method. You know, you made it disappear by requiring it to do A, B, and C. What if it's not a machine? What if it's a mind? And
Mm.
it doesn't follow your rules? It doesn't exist then? That's like nutty, So I I'm not dismissive. I'm not anti-science, but science does the easy stuff, in my opinion.
Mm.
What really does the hard stuff is subjectivity and consciousness and philosophy of mind. That's the really hard stuff. And that's where we don't have proof and we don't have answers, not because we didn't do enough science, but because science itself is inadequate
Mm.
for those questions. So that's at the core, Caleb, of kind of certainly what I'm trying to do
Mm-hmm.
is call into question those scientific assumptions. And so the question for me isn't, is it real or not? It's what is reality?
Mm-hmm.
And certainly materialism and rationalism and enlightenment science are describing parts of reality. There's no question about that. I mean, hence the photograph of the galaxies behind you. I mean, come on. We have modern cosmology now. I mean, of course, this is great stuff.
Yeah.
But that's an external view of the universe or the cosmos. That's not an inner view. And it's not that one is wrong and the other's right. It's that you need both.
Agree. It sounds like one of the things you're bumping against here is the limitations of contemporary physical science in understanding the nature of the conscious experience.
Yeah. It's not just science, though. So one of the last books I wrote is How to Think Impossibly.
Mm.
And what I often say is, don't reduce this to your science or your religion.
Mm.
Don't explain the phenomena by your physics or cosmology or by your theology. I mean, you can do that. Go ahead and, of course, you can do that, but that doesn't exhaust the phenomenon.
Yeah, it calls to mind the elephant story, basically the wise men evaluating an elephant from their own perspective.
Yeah, and the five blind men, they all got a piece of the elephant. They're absolutely right about what they think that elephant is, but they don't see the whole picture because they don't have, well, they're blind for one thing, and they don't see the whole elephant.
So I think this experiential data focus of Archives of the Impossible seems like it's a key part of this conversation. One of the things you get at in the flip is that science is having such a hard time getting into these subjects because so many of them are like profoundly personal, like people's near-death experiences or poltergeist experiences or telepathy experiences. Even those are like really internal phenomena. Go ahead.
Let me put it this way. So first of all, I have certainly been pushed and positively pushed into a physicalist understanding of the abduction phenomenon, which I think needs to be wrestled with more. I think there's something very physical and very real about these extraordinary abduction events that we have not taken into account. So I'm by no means against the physical or scientific study of these things, but I am trying to push against our present understanding of what science is and our past or present understandings of what religion is, and I'm trying to move us forward into some other worldview. Absolutely.
Let's talk about that worldview with regard to the humanities. How do you picture the call to action for the humanities? Like, what would you like to see happen in the some people call the soft sciences world, but also like the narrative arts and things like English and drama or poetry?
So first of all, the soft sciences sounds like a hard scientist said that.
Yeah,
it sounds very sciencey.
It's a diss.
Soft means not really real and hard means really real. I mean, there's all kinds of philosophical implications that I reject in that. But I understand. I get what you mean. The humanities, it's not that they're right either. I think the humanities are very good at emphasizing the horizontal, the notion of identity and history and context and construction. They're very bad at emphasizing or even acknowledging the vertical.
What would be some elements of the vertical here to help me get my brain around that?
So, for example, when someone has an experience of precognition, they're experiencing something of the future that is not in the present. It's not in them. It's definitely vertical to them. It's somewhere else or it's someone else.
Okay.
And what we say in the humanities too often is, well, that didn't happen, or that's just a coincidence. And I'm like, well, no, it's not, because these precognitive, they're just too good. It's too precise. You can't have this many variables to play out in the way that clearly plays out. So by transcendence, I mean something that is not in this horizontal worldview that we're presently in. I mean, something that intervenes or interrupts this horizontal world. And the humanities are very bad at that. However, their history is very good at that. So for example, one of the things I often do is I refer to religion as legitimate science fiction.
Interesting.
Religion historically is all about altered states. It's all about these super experiences and how some people can cultivate them and have them and other people can't, Caleb. And how do we build a system then around these super experiences? That's what religion is historically. So the history of religions is really obvious in that. And the problem with religion is that it then becomes exclusive. It says my way or the highway, essentially. It says, and that's where I think I am convinced we went wrong. I think we need a global, comparative, whole earth view of this phenomenon, and not a local culture or community or religious view. And this is why I love the sciences, is because they not only provide this whole earth perspective, they provide a whole cosmos perspective. I mean, the physical laws on those galaxies behind you are the same physical laws that run the present, this one, that run you and I. So there's a kind of universalism built into science that I think is amazing. So what I'm trying to do is get those humanities and those sciences to talk to one another. And one of the books I'm thinking of here, or thing is by a man. It's a philosopher named Tom Nagel, called Mind and Cosmos.
Is that does that one have the famous essay about the bat?
No, it doesn't. But that's Tom Nagel. Okay. What's it like to be a bat? The subtitle of that book is something like "Why Darwinian Materialism is Certainly Wrong."
Okay.
And the reason it's wrong is because of us. The universe produced Caleb and Jeff. It produced consciousness. Therefore, consciousness has to be integral to the universe. It has to be woven right into the evolutionary or astrophysical nature of the cosmos. And that's precisely what science takes off the table. So there's like this huge hole or abyss in the painting of the beautiful painting of science, and it's called us. You can't talk about Caleb or Jeff in it. You have to remove all subjectivity. You have to only talk about objectivity. You have to only talk about objects in time and space and measurement and prediction. You can't actually talk about interior states of mind or consciousness. It's forbidden. And so to me, that is a huge red flag. Something fundamentally inadequate there. I don't say wrong.
But missing in the toolkit.
It's definitely missing. And that's when I say that the scientific method can't help us talk about subjectivity or mind or consciousness. I don't mean we haven't done enough science or technology, but it literally can't do that. It's in principle incapable of doing that.
Well, the one thing I keep thinking about that, two things. One, the best it can do currently is this like data analysis. So like we can't go into the subjective, but we can like line up everybody's stories and say, here they all are. And here's the percentage of people who experienced a blue being or a tall being, et cetera. But then the other thing I keep thinking is that we're getting there on some kind of brain reading tech. Like we're not all the way there yet where we can just put a hat on you and go, this is what you're thinking. But there have been some really promising like sort of neuro interfaces in the last 5-10 years.
Again, I don't
be moving in that direction.
I don't think so, Caleb.
Okay.
I think that's what we call promissory materialism.
Okay.
It's like we'll get there. Just give us enough science and technology and we'll eventually figure this out. I'm like, no, you won't. You will never, you can't figure this out because you can't reproduce this interiority or this I-ness of things. You can tell me all about data and you can tell me what I'm thinking and you can mimic and reproduce what looks like consciousness. I get that.
Right.
Totally. I get that. But that itself is not consciousness.
I agree. I think
that is not in this interiority. And that's really what I'm trying to say is these experiences that we're talking about, there's a kind of interiority or a kind of presence to them that you just don't get in this third person external view.
Yeah, because it's fundamentally personal in some just like almost physical way. And what I would propose here is that although we couldn't necessarily deeply understand the nature of that experience, what we might be able to do is like record the brain's experience of something like that.
We can do that.
And then by doing that, we could sort of demonstrate to other aspects of academia, of science, that there is kind of a there that would encourage further investigation. Like if you had a great brain recording of somebody's NDE, near-death experience, or another supernatural encounter, you could say, look, we don't know what really happened, but we can say what happened to this person's brain while it was going on. And it looks like X, Y, and Z. So we can say that they're not lying about their experience. And then we could maybe investigate further what that might imply.
The problem is I already know that. It's like, why are we spending millions of dollars to prove something our grandmother could have told us?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, of course they're not lying.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and this, what you're describing goes on today all the time in psychedelic studies, by the way. I mean, and what happens, and we can learn a lot, but what happens when we do those neuroscientific studies and we learn that the brain does less on a psychedelic or in a near-death experience than it does like right now? Where do we go?
Yeah.
I mean, and I think where we go, Caleb, is we go to a model of the brain or mind in which the brain is a mediator. It's not a producer of consciousness.
I wanted to ask you about this because I think in our spiritual model, our metaphysical model conversation, I think like the concept of brain as receptor seems to be like one of the maybe non-negotiable key ideas to that world being possible. So I'd love for you to explore it a little bit more. But I want to stave that off just one more time and ask, to your point about why we're ignoring grandma, who's been telling us this stuff for thousands of years. This might be a little bit of an aside, but what do you think it says about science and about our human pursuit of knowledge that for thousands of years we've had billions of reports about these metaphysical experiences, and we've just never pursued them to the point that we have explained them satisfactorily, and in fact we have like broadly dismissed them from the conversation of the project of truth seeking at all? What does that say about us? Why are we doing that?
I don't know. I mean, that's a big question. I mean, I have the same question, Caleb. It's like, the way I put that is, maybe truth is esoteric. Maybe we're not set up.
Mm.
We're not made to know the truth of things.
Mm.
The exception to that is some people do know, and some people are set up, and so that's why I'm interested in religion and esotericism in particular, is because it's filled with people who actually do have these experiences, not just grandma to project onto grandma, but these are people who, I mean, shamans and saints and people who have mystical experiences, they're not normal. They're not ordinary people. I mean, I know some of these people. They're not like, certainly like I am. They're extraordinary, and they suffer though. They suffer because they exist in a social system that doesn't recognize them. At least in the modern Western culture. I think there have been cultures that have recognized them, but have put them into a particular box or a particular category. It's not that I want to romanticize or idolize a particular previous religious culture either. I think that they have problems as well.
Sure, yeah. The tribalism has some fundamental issues in addition to, modern commercial technological society. Just like we do, there were problems in indigenous ancient cultures. I guess I want to ping one more thing about the scientific academic intersection with woo, whatever, spiritual reality.
It's okay. You can call it woo. I mean, it is woo. It's impossible compared to our models.
Our standard classical frameworks at this point. And that is to sort of answer your question about what we do if we read somebody's brain. They report having a profound experience, but it doesn't show up in the brain scans. Like, so there are some NDE reports where like people flatlined, and as far as we could tell, there was no activity in the brain, but they experienced like a rich internal life in which they saw stuff and did stuff and felt things. So I think the answer to that question is that when we get data like that, it points us toward an area we haven't explored yet. It says there's blue ocean here, basically. There's like, our model is insufficient, and we therefore have to expand it in some way.
Yeah, I think, and again, I don't think, to repeat the phrase a lot, correlation is not causation. We can identify lots of correlations, but what we can't regenerate is the cause, is the internal experience. So I think that's the distinction or the difference there.
Like, you can't keep running this experiment. Basically, it's a similar problem to UFOs.
You can run the experiment all you want, but you're never going to reproduce that particular experience. I'll give you a concrete example. So, when I talk to experiencers and they talk about encountering an entity, well, they can talk about that all they want and they can tell me the story, but I don't have any first person encounter myself with the entity. If I did, I would be as shocked and as moved as they are, So I can apply third person language, story, events around it, or I can create correlations and study their brain till the cows come home. But I am not going to reproduce that ontological shock that they went through when they encountered, oh my God, there's a physical bug in my room on my body. It's not a hallucination. It's not a dream. It's not a function of sleep paralysis. It's physically so. Okay. That is what I'm talking about. is that presence or that shock that no scientific method, no humanistic method, no academic method can reproduce.
And you talk in the flip about these experiences being important to people who decide to research this stuff because they convince them that there's a there in a way that allows them to devote a part of their life to researching it.
So the flip, so I'll just tell you a bit about the flip. But the flip, so first of all, I teach at a STEM-oriented university, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Most of the students, the young people, are going to be doctors or geologists or chemists. They're gonna go into the sciences, and they're going to do those things for a living. And I started out using kind of classical religious texts, and I began to suspect that they were dismissing them with the simple observation that, oh, so and so didn't know his or her science.
Mm-hmm.
If Saint blah blah did, they wouldn't say those ridiculous things.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I just shifted to scientists and engineers and medical professionals who had the exact same experiences.
Nice.
And so I essentially backed the students into the corner, and I said, okay, now what do you do? I want to see what you do now.
Yeah.
And of course, these are good people.
Yeah.
They're like, oh. And what's so interesting about the scientists and the engineers and the medical professionals is they're trained in this materialistic, physicalist method. But once they have the experience, they understand by personal experience intuitively that isn't actually so. That the materialism and the technology and the science work just fine. Of course they work. They're part of reality. But there's also this innerness, there's this interior aspect that it can't touch, but they have then been in because of a near-death experience or a psychedelic trip or some kind of accident or whatever the case might be. And that's what I call the flip.
Mm-hmm.
Because it flips these physicalists or materialist thinkers, but it also removes them from their social conditioning in a really dramatic way.
Mm.
And I, just to kind of speak, I guess personally of this, I just heard a presentation on the Enlightenment and on major figures in France and the Enlightenment movement who had near-death experiences. Mm. Well, those experiences removed them from their social surround and allowed them to articulate these Enlightenment values of democracy and freedom and in a way that was really powerful. And so I think at its core, I think these values have this kind of transcendence again of the social world embedded in them. And we can turn to them and say, okay, look, these are parts of what we've been doing all along. Let's look at that. Let's emphasize that as well.
So interesting. The ways in which this could have influenced our development as a civilization this whole time.
It did. Of course it did.
Connection. Yeah.
Of course it did. This is what we call religion.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the source of a lot of human civilization and culture are exactly these altered states. And that's what I'm trying to say. These are not tangential woo-woo experiences. These are at the core of what it means to be a human being. And it's really what drives ideas and movements and science. And this is the key right here. And if you talk to particular experiencers or near-death experiences, this wasn't another experience that they had. This was the most important thing that ever happened to them. Okay? And if you talk to scientists who had an aha moment, they'll talk about it in a very similar way, So inspiration and creativity in the arts or in the sciences or in life itself, I think is really this sort of aha moment that cannot be reproduced or reproduced on beck and call, at least.
Yeah, and we currently lack the tools to describe it in our scientific frameworks. I
We
lean a
do.
lot on thinking if this stuff is as real as it sure as heck seems like it is, then the tools that we have developed are incomplete, but could still be moving us in the right direction. Like if we had the right tools in our toolkit, we could understand the conscious experience more deeply. And maybe, some of the beings that we may be encountering, they might have better tools for interfacing with those aspects of reality. That seems intuitive to me.
I think one of the goals of the Archives of the Impossible project, it's not that cosmologies or metaphysical positions are wrong. It's that they're inadequate. And I think that's a fundamentally different orientation.
Mm.
So it's not that something like physicalism or materialism or panpsychism or whatever you want to call it is wrong. Of course, it describes particular experiences and encompasses them, but it's inadequate to this fuller description of the full human spectrum of experience. That's really what I'm trying to get at, is that fullness or that full spectrum.
Do you think it's unimaginable that such a science could exist, or do you think it's conceivable that we might someday create
Well,
tools that could interface with that aspect of reality?
first of all, I think our imaginations are essentially limited by our sensors.
Mm.
I think we're in our societies. I think what is actually possible is far beyond what we have today and what we imagine is so. I mean, that's really kind of the key. Is I think what we think of as science or proof today is just a form of presentism.
Mm.
It's essentially where we're at now.
Right. Yeah.
But where we're going to be in a thousand years, if we're still around, is
Yeah.
not here.
Or even 100.
No, it's not here. And you could just look at the history of science and you can see this instantly. You can
Yeah.
Newtonian physics is not quantum physics. It's not relativity theory. They're totally different, you know, but relativity theory and quantum mechanics, it they look like Newtonian physics on a certain level. But if you get to a high speed or a big enough cosmos, then that doesn't work at all. The Newtonian, it's just wrong. It's just not right. But it's correct enough.
It's
right
applicable within its frame of reference.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, this is a great transition, I think, into our playground here where we can ask, what is reality, and play around with some ideas. I want to bounce this off you because my brother asked me last night, well, what are your mental models? If you're talking about this, like, what are your metaphysical models? And I'm working on updating them and evaluating what things I put toward the like higher probability end of the spectrum and the lower. And what I came up with at the time was that I have some kind of intuition about consciousness that it works in some way that's similar to the physical world, which is to say that within different sort of frames of reference, it behaves quite differently. So like the quantum world, as you were just sort of alluding to, has different rules of operation than the like world of astrophysics and stellar mechanics. And we don't understand why that is, but we do understand that it is. So by analogy, it seems at least possible that the conscious world works in a similar way, where it's such that our physical experience in these bodies is one aspect of a conscious experience that maybe could correlate metaphorically with like the experience of an atom or a quark or a tachyon, and then up a couple levels, there's an ocean to experience out there, and we can't necessarily perceive that intuitively from our bodies. So first of all, I'd just love to hear what you think of that framework. And then I'd be curious to hear what kind of tools you're using to explore this playground, or what ideas you find particularly fascinating and fun in this space.
Yeah. I mean, so I think I said this. I like models that keep things on the table.
Mm.
And I like basically the way I personally work is I take people's experiences as obvious, and then I ask the question, well, what does the physical universe, what does the cosmos have to look like to make this experience possible?
Mm. Nice.
That's really the basic idea. And I'll give you a simple example, which I've already alluded to, is take precognition. people have experiences of the future, usually of some disaster, by the way, or some suffering or some accident.
Mm.
Well, that means the future has already happened. Okay.
Yeah.
What does that mean about the physical world? Well, we actually have no problem with that in relativity theory, by the way. We have no problem with that. It's called the block cosmology.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes really good sense of precognition. But precognition is never invoked in it. I'm like, why not?
Yeah, because that is implied by a mathematical model in which sort of time is a big structure and it all simultaneously exists, right?
Yeah, yeah. And like we also reference the consciousness not being a product of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I like that idea is not because I know it's right, but because it makes things possible that are otherwise not possible. And I, again, like that. I don't like the idea that the brain produces consciousness because then it takes all these things off the table that clearly do happen.
Right, which is to say, in another way, it fails to have explanatory power for a wide range of experiences. Does that sound right?
Yeah. And what you kind of articulated was some form of panpsychism, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
that every all matter is minded and all mind is mattered. So they're together, and as they become more integral and they become more complex, then other forms of consciousness come online until you get Caleb and Jeff. And you know, I guess the problem with that is it doesn't explain why things come together
Mm-hmm.
to produce greater
Mm-hmm.
forms of consciousness or mind. It just kind of leaves that unanswered. And one of my favorite definitions of hydrogen actually goes something like this: hydrogen, a light, odorless gas that, given enough time, turns into people. Okay,
Nice.
well, why does it do that?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the $1 million, what we used to call the $1 million question. Now $1 million isn't worth very much, but it's like something is in the cosmos that's producing consciousness, that's producing us. And this is the Tom Nagel question again,
Mm-hmm.
So, and panpsychism, it also suffers from what we call the combination problem, which is essentially what I just articulated. Why do little things do little things combine to make bigger things, and why do you eventually get really complex conscious organisms? It does remove what we call the mind matter problem, which is only a problem, by the way, if you think matter produces mind. It's not a problem at all if you live in a
Mind produces
panpsychism world.
matter.
So panpsychism solves the mind matter problem, but it invokes other problems like the combination problem.
Interesting. So what kind of if you are open to exploring this space, I'd be very curious about.
This is what I do. I mean, come on.
Well, great. I know some people get a little dicey around this question, so I have a hard time asking it in ways that are productive. So if you feel like a better place to steer the conversation, please feel free. And if you want to take a swing at what kind of metaphysical models are you working with these days, I'd love to hear it. But if you want, I can also ask you some more specific versions of that question and dial in on some discrete phenomena.
Yeah, no, for example, again, the picture behind your shoulder, we don't know that that's not conscious.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know that. We can see the galaxies, but we actually, maybe the whole universe is conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not just something. What's it like to be a bat? But what's it like to be the universe?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. This is a real question. I think I have, and where I land, I land on something called dual aspect monism, which basically says that mind and matter emerge from a common substrate or a common unus mundus, or one world. And so you get the mental and you get the material, and those split apart in human experience, but they're actually not split apart. they're actually emerging from the same basic reality. And the reason I like that model a lot is it helps me to explain why material events sometimes correspond almost perfectly to mental events,
Mm.
and vice versa, by the way, because they just split off of the same reality. Of course, they correspond. It's
Mm.
the same stuff.
Hmm.
It's just in two different forms, and it
Interesting.
also explains to me why the material world can act as if it has its own laws and it isn't connected to the mental world, and yet it is connected to the mental world. There are these correlations that are constantly correlating or corresponding, and sometimes this gets really weird, Caleb. Sometimes people have extraordinary experiences where something in the material world corresponds perfectly to what's going on in the mental world. And to me that just makes instant sense in this dual aspect monistic worldview.
So by dual aspect monism, I just want to
So
repeat what I think you said, which is like we're looking at two qualities of one substance,
correct,
basically.
correct.
The monism is a unified
So
everythingness, and
the
then the
dual the
dual is
dual
the mind and the physical.
the dualism of that model is epistemological, to speak philosophically. In other words, it's about forms of knowledge,
Mm.
and the monism is about ontology, or about the way the
Like
world
what
really is.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why it's called dual aspect monism. It has these two aspects, the mental and material, but it's also monistic in that they emerge from this deeper source.
So that also sounds like it relates to why you might be skeptical that the tools of the material can ever penetrate satisfactorily the world of the mental.
Of course they can't,
Mm.
because well, they can't. Those are two aspects of reality, and if you just affirm the one aspect of reality, okay, you're going to be always right in terms of whatever your material system is, but you're going to leave off all of this subjectivity.
So I guess because this show has the letters UFO in it, I should ask you, what do you think UFOs are in this model? And I know you said, I don't know at the beginning, but maybe we could do a lightning round to go out here about UFOs, past lives, spirit realms. I could ask about a bunch of these things, or if you'd like to play with some of those toys yourself, we could explore how they
Yeah,
potentially intersect or don't. Since we're keeping everything on the table, I'm curious, which
yeah.
are your favorite aspects of these models of reality?
So again, I love the UFO precisely because we don't know what it is.
Mm.
That's what an intellectual loves, is that not knowing. I know that the language of the UFO, is a military Cold War mythology, essentially, the invading alien, essentially, that comes from outside the nation state, comes from some other place, and needs to be fought off. It's a threat. It's an alien invasion, as we say.
Right.
I'm deeply suspicious of that
Mm.
narrative, Caleb, because I think it's entirely bound by our Cold War experience, and
Mm.
because we also call immigrants aliens, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's somehow a fear of the other that gets encoded in this mythology. And if to speak bluntly here, if you expect aliens and demons, then you're going to get aliens and demons.
Mm.
Your belief system or your reigning metaphysical model is going to partly determine what is experienced or what is sensed to be real. If, though, you listen to people who have experiences really usually completely spontaneously, these experiences aren't entirely negative, by the way, in
Mm-hmm.
general. They include a fear or a terror quality to them, but they often result in transformation or in some kind of metamorphosis that is really positive. And I think that entire experience of entity encounter and metamorphosis is important here. And I think if you look long enough at the UFO, what you realize is that, yes, there's this nuts and bolts kind of fear narrative that we're talking about. Yes, you can do the science on these aspects of it, But there are all these paranormal aspects too. People
Hmm.
are having clairvoyant or precognitive experiences after a UFO encounter, or their the space and time open up, or uh, they talk about telepathy, or they go on and on about things like this. So
Hmm.
there's something about the experience itself that has these paranormal dimensions to it that I think
Hmm.
we just cut off. And what I'm trying to argue is, let's not do that.
Hmm.
Let's do the science, let's do the nuts and bolts stuff, but let's also do the paranormal and the weird and the strange stuff, because it's all
Hmm.
clearly part of the phenomenon.
Yeah, that seems right to me too. Go ahead. Did you have some more there?
Yeah, I mean, this is why I say I don't know what it is, because
Hmm.
once you put all of that those stages or that spectrum on the table, it
Hmm.
becomes really complicated, and it just shatters our notion that the mental and the material world are separate. By the way, it just shatters it.
Hmm.
So this is why I reacted the way I did to your call for proof. It's just like,
Hmm.
all you're doing is you're just affirming the material world again, and you're up here in this dual aspect split.
Hmm.
You're not down here in this monistic world where the mental and material are really the same thing. And
Yeah,
I think I
I
think
think,
the
yeah, go ahead.
UFO, I'm sorry, the UFO, Caleb, it pushes us towards that one world, is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't quite arrive there, but it
Mhm.
pushes us towards that.
I have had that experience. I think just a couple of years of getting deep into this, of sort of like finding more and more things to put onto the table. Like every time I read a new book, I'm like, okay, well, maybe fairies are real, and all right, I'm going to have to consider the afterlife is a real place, and okay, past lives and karma and all this stuff that I previously just left off the table. I've been bringing it back on, and I'm curious how your mind works about this table, because the way that I like to do it is to sort of sort these things into a spectrum of probability. And without taking any of them off the table, I move some things up toward likely and some things toward maybe I would need more evidence about that, or I want to hear more stories about it. So I'm curious if that's a part of how you see the project here. And then I have a follow up about sort of ontological facts that would like follow out from logic. But I will actually follow up with that in a separate question. How do you engage with the project of evaluating probability in this space, or does that seem sort of counter to your project of just like holding space for all the potential of these ideas?
Well, probability is itself a scientific method.
Mm-hmm.
Statistics is, what, a couple hundred years old now, is all. And it basically wants to know what's real and what's not real,
Mm-hmm.
at least the way you're talking.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure probability can get us very far, to be really honest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm not, again, to repeat myself, I'm not calling into question that some things are more relevant or more common for particular people or communities, but I'm calling into question that the method itself. That some things are more probable or statistically likely, is itself a metaphysical position that I want to call that into question. Um, a lot of things are completely improbable, but they
Mm-hmm.
happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't under I don't get why probability or statistical analysis is helpful in the end.
Okay, yeah, I hear that. I think I can onboard that, and I ultimately it feels kind of like a project of personal intuition to like decide whether leprechauns seem more or less real than Bigfoot
Well, okay,
at the
so
moment.
let me address that. Let me address the leprechauns and the Bigfoot. If you operate with a model that the imagination is a medium
Mm-hmm.
and not just schlock, or the brain is a translator and not the producer of consciousness, then Bigfoot and leprechauns and fairies and angels and aliens, all these things, none of them become problematic because they're clearly imaginal. You're clearly framing or shaping them in whatever your social imagination tells you, but that doesn't mean that's what's really there. Something can be coming through that.
I wanted to ask you about that word, actually. Do you mean something different from imaginary when you say imaginal, right?
I do.
Conceptual, but not necessarily real or not real?
So I'll just tell you a quick story here. I've said it elsewhere, but I'll say it again. I once hosted a conference at a place called the Esalen Institute, and I asked people to come with two things. One is the most extraordinary thing that ever happened to them, and the second was a model of the imagination that could make that extraordinary thing possible. Everybody came with a extraordinary thing.
Cool.
Nobody came with a model of the imagination. Not one person. And so what I realized is that in English, what we mean by the imagination, it's a really pathetic theory, Caleb. It's a pathetic word. And it just it's like hallucination. It's just like this dodge. It's just like this intellectual dodge that I think our ancestors and other cultures, they had better ways to talk about it, but again, not always adequate ways either. I think what I'm calling the imagination is really a form of mind that is communicating to us through images and through stories and through things like Bigfoot, but is not itself Bigfoot. It's not those stories or those images. I'll give you a simple example here. So people have precognitive dreams. They know damn well they're dreaming. They know perfectly well that their mind is making shit up, but they're also having a precognitive hit. So there's something about the precognitive hit that is manifesting to the social ego through the dreaming psyche, to speak, I guess, in modern terms. But that dreaming precognition is not the dreaming psyche. So I think that's the key move we have to make. And so Bigfoot doesn't bother me, by the way. I'm like, yeah, Bigfoot's cool. Let's bring Bigfoot on. But let's not imagine Bigfoot some kind of biological species that we're looking for. I think that's where we make a mistake there, because again, we literalize it. We make it material and physical.
That's interesting. I'm open to the idea. Like, one of the things that I would keep on the table, I would sort of put those things on the table next to each other. Like, it is possible that Bigfoot is a manifestation of a super mind that we're engaging with narratively. But I would also put on the table, it is possible that Bigfoot is some kind of creature that we don't understand, that can interface with aspects of reality we don't currently know how to describe.
That's possible too. But I would say you can't have that question if you're bound to some ontologies. And where I would push you is, okay, so what do you do when Bigfoot shows up around UFOs?
Yeah.
Because it does. They do. So it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. And I think we have to embrace that weirdness. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And not or materialize it in a way that we're then in the realm of statistics or probability, to use your own language.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I actually do think we're having like an engaged discourse here. So I'm going to take one more pass at it, and then I'll just ask you for your calls to action on our way out. But I'm not totally sure how to frame this, so please forgive me if I stumble a little bit. But my perspective here, I use this phrase, what must we believe, as kind of my like philosophical touchstone. I made this poster to remind myself that I'm searching for the capital T truth here. I'm interested in
we all are.
The nature of reality. Yeah, it is. This is a shared product. And so the way that I think about it is there is a fact of the matter somewhere out there. And this is a complicated space that we don't have great tools to explore. And so therefore it makes sense to put everything on the table. But where I start to get a little sort of antsy around the universalizing project of the conceptual table is that I want to know what things on the table are just like fun ideas and which things represent like true facts about the nature of reality. And so one sort of like ontological tool for doing this is these buckets of, or epistemological tool of buckets of mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive dichotomies, right? So like a good example in this space of a key important idea that either is or isn't true is the receptor theory of the brain. Is if the brain is a receptor for the mind, then that opens up a whole bunch of conscious and spiritual possibilities. If it's not, then it forecloses a bunch of those possibilities. And one of those conditions is a fact. Like one of those conditions is the state of the matter. I guess, I want to bounce that project off you generally of pursuing truth and give you one more chance to spin me back into my place or take it in a fun direction to you.
Yeah, let me speak to that. First of all, welcome to the club. I think we're all after. I mean, a lot of us are after truth with a capital T. Certainly, I am.
Cool.
I'll tell you a story first.
Great.
And then I'll go to an answer. The story, which you may have heard me tell already, involves a police officer named Captain Shermer in Yahoo, Nebraska. Or Wahoo. I'm sorry, Wahoo. I always say Yahoo, but it's
still
Wahoo.
Pretty silly.
Wahoo, yeah, I've actually been to Wahoo. I know it. And,
sounds fun.
And the story is that this UFO lands on the highway and this alien gets out and it says to Captain Shermer, "We want you to believe in us, but not too much." And to me, that I don't even know if that story is true or not, Caleb, but it captures perfectly this paradox of belief. And what I'm trying to say is listen to beliefs for sure, but don't take them literally. Believe them to some extent, but not too much. I'm like the little alien. And this to me is, I keep pushing for some kind of multiplicity or some kind of plurality in all of these apparitions, but that itself is a truth with a capital T. Because what I'm trying to argue is that the way reality manifests to human beings is multiple, but it's done through this imagination. And that's precisely why it's multiple and why it's in multiple contexts. And so, for example, people will often say that even in multiverse cosmologies, the multiverse really is a universe, by the way. It's really, okay, there are lots of universes, but they all take place inside a particular set of physical or mathematical structures or laws. So it really is truth with a capital T. It just requires a multiplicity to create the unity. And I think that's what dual aspect monism does for me. It acknowledges this plurality of things, but it also traces it back to this deeper or more fundamental unity. So that to me is truth with a capital T. But I don't think you get there by believing in fairies or Bigfoot or any of the religions that are on the table now, either because they're exclusive. You have to say, well, all these people don't have these experiences or they're possessed by demons or something. I don't know what you say, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I totally agree about the walled gardens of concept structures. And what I mean when I say must with believe is something close to facts. Like, what do we have to accept as a true statement about the nature of reality? I want to ask you about cosmic humanism on our way out, and just in general, what kind of calls to action you'd like to issue to the universe. What do you think we should all be doing and thinking? How should we be approaching this project of expanding our understanding of the nature of reality and holding space for each other while we do?
Yeah, the whole point. I mean, one of the basic messages I hope is clear is that I think we need this comparative or global perspective, and ultimately we need a cosmic perspective. This is why I love cosmology and modern science. Is again, it gives us this cosmic perspective, and I think what we think of as the human, I think needs massively reimagined. I think we have limited that human being to actually men, and primarily white men, by the way, in the European West. And I think even on this planet, this single planet, that's just not true. I think humanity is much bigger and much more expansive than that. And when you get to other planets and other stars and other galaxies, I think it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's really what I mean by cosmic humanism. But I do think there's something special about the human being, and I don't want to just submerge us in a sea of life, as it were. I want to really say there is something special. The universe really is speaking to itself through human consciousness in a particular kind of way that I think is really kind of the key to it.
Beautiful work that you're doing. Thank you so much. Is there a place where you like people to come and engage with your projects?
So the easiest place is my website. It's jeffreyjkripal.com. It's not the Rice website. The Rice website's fine, but the jjkripal.com has everything there, and it really goes kind of through the project and tries to push this particular viewpoint, which I've tried to articulate here.
And I know you teach courses sometimes online. Do you have any coming up that people could potentially join?
There's one going on now, actually, that people could sign up for and receive asynchronistically, as they say. It's on something called Morbid Anatomy. And it's with a gentleman named Peter Skafish, who's an anthropologist that I'm teaching with. And it's called An Experiment in the Superhumanities. That's what it's called.
Cool. Oh, that sounds great. And finally, which book would you recommend that people pick up first from your canon if they want to engage further with your thought?
Well, The Flip. You mentioned The Flip. I mean, it's short, and it's I think one of the more popular ones, and because it's short. Years ago, I decided nobody's going to read all these things, and so I wrote what I call the book of all the books. It's a memoir and a manifesto called Secret Body.
Oh, cool.
So I point people there too, because it really kind of tells my life story and why I wrote each book and what they're about, and it tries to encapsulate the whole oeuvre, as it were.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you. Is there anything that you'd like to return to, address, fill in, cover, or leave us with as we walk? Or you think we've done a pretty good job here?
No. What I most want to say is, Caleb, go do it. It's really about generations continuing on the conversation, and I really mean that. And I sit with people who are 18 and 19-year-olds every semester, and I really think it's about these questions being developed and the answers changing. Obviously, we're going to change. So it's that multi-generational kind of spirit that I most want to communicate, I think. And podcasts, people listen to podcasts. I mean, this is how people absorb information. They don't read books, by the way. But, I'm still old-fashioned, and the books will be around after we're all gone. So I continue to write because, well, I'm just an old fuddy-duddy. But it's really the podcasts that I think, and the film and the television that are being consumed today.
Well, I'm sure people enjoyed listening to this. I hope they're encouraged to have some fun conversations in their own lives, and I hope they check out your work. I'm very grateful for the thoughts you're adding to the world and the leadership you're showing in this area, which is fascinating to an absolute endless degree. I'm very grateful for you sharing some of your time with me today. Thank you so much, Jeff. This has been fun.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And that's the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening or watching. If you like WTUFO and you want it to keep existing, support us at patreon.com/WTUFO or on YouTube or on Buzzsprout for as little as you want per month. Patreon or YouTube or Buzzsprout, this show is brought to you by you. So thank you very much for your support. I hope you keep listening, and I hope you have a lovely day.